Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar of DICE Alliance. Let us wait for a couple minutes more before we start to let other participants join, and then we are going to dive in. All right, let us get started as we have lots of content prepared. And once again, welcome to the webinar of DICE Alliance, highlighting shared efforts to develop AI compliance tools and frameworks. It's 11 a.m. Central European Time, and I'm very happy to welcome you here. So this is the webinar of 4 projects, DATAPACT, ACHILLES, Accomplish, and Certain. And I'm very happy to present our speakers today. It's going to be Ina Novalia from Joseph Stephen Institute, George Constantinides from University of Southampton, Martin Hayford and Olena Denisenko from University of Tartu, André Cajero from Fraunhofer, Portugal, and Fenereti Lampataki from Suits 5 Digital Intelligence Solutions. First, some housekeeping. So this session is going to last 90 minutes, and it's going to be recorded and published on the social channels of all the 4 projects. Meanwhile, you can also ask the questions in the Q&A session that you can also see on your screen. And in the end of the webinar, we are going to have some dedicated time to answer these questions. And you can not only you can write the questions, but also you can raise your hands and ask them directly to our speakers and direct them maybe to one of them specifically. But throughout the course of the webinar, you can also comment and put your references in the chat. So I would like also to present the agenda to you. We are going, of course, to start with some introduction and the purpose of the webinar. Then we are going to dive deeper into presenting and understanding each project separately. After that, we will explore a collaborative approach towards AI compliance and see how the synergy of the project works. And the main part is going to be the panel discussion. After that, as I already mentioned, we are going to explore better the questions that you are going to have to our speakers. So this webinar brings together the 4 projects of the DICE Alliance to explore how Europe is developing practical frameworks and tools to support trustworthy and coherent AI. The session will highlight emerging solutions to help organizations to translate regulatory requirements such as the the AI Act into operational processes across the AI lifecycle. Through project highlights and discussions, this webinar aims to show how technical tools, compliance frameworks, and governance approaches can work together to enable responsible AI deployment in data spaces and real-world applications. It also provides a platform for discussion on common challenges, synergies between initiatives, and the next steps on building a coherent European ecosystem for AI compliance. So I'm very happy to start the session on presenting each project in particular, and we are going to start with DATAPACT, which is going to be described by Ina and George. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Katerina. Hi, everyone. I hope you can see my screen. Let me know if you're not. My name is George Konstantinidis. I'm a professor of computer science at the University of Southampton, and I am also the scientific coordinator of DATAPACT. And I'm presenting this project together with my colleagues here, Ina and Katerina. Katerina you just saw, and Ina, she will join in a few slides. I'm going to give a brief overview of the project. The project is all about compliance by design of data and AI operations and pipelines. So this means that we are building different tools in different dimensions. We are building technical tools for compliance. This is our compliance toolbox. We're building methodologies and legal and regulatory tools, which is our compliance framework. And we do this in order to support all the infrastructure and the realization of data operations and putting together operations in a data pipeline, usually aimed towards AI processing. So we have the third set of tools, which are the data and AI pipeline tools, right? The unique characteristic here is that the project offers tools to build data operations and AI operations and train AI models that are compliant by design. They are compliance aware. So we have a set of contributions across a range of topics, focusing on privacy, data privacy, consent management, ODRL and data access and usage policies, trust systems, fairness, explainability, bias, and robustness algorithms in the context of data and AI pipelines. We focus on compliance-aware environmental sustainability. So your processing, your data processing, your AI processing should be environmental aware inherently, right? Of course, we take all the legislation, the guidelines, and the ethical frameworks in the next step towards compliant pipelines. And we also build applications on top of these pipelines. So we combine these operations and pipelines to build application and use cases is media and entertainment, healthcare, smart cities, law enforcement, customer relationship, manufacturing, public data. So we have 7 use cases. This is an overwhelming initially slide, but I choose to show this better than bullets and words. I choose pictures, right? So this shows in a glance the major components of our project. On the left, you have the compliance toolbox and framework, right? And on the right, you have the framework that allows you to design and execute data and AI operations and pipelines, right? So you have two main functionalities in the compliance capabilities, let's say, in the compliance framework, which is compliance assessment, both at design time and at execution time. So while you design your pipeline, you are assessing compliance, right? And while you're executing your pipeline, when the data flows in, you're still have compliance assessment tools, and we have compliance enforcement, compliance realization tools. So during the assessment, you might find that you're not compliant in, let's say, for example, GDPR, and you have to anonymize. So the compliance assessment module calls the compliance realization module in order to make the design of your pipeline compliant or to correct the execution of your pipeline. These are the four main, let's say, points of our dimensions: assessment, realization, design, and execution. So in terms of grouping our tools together, we offer a rather unique and interesting set of tools. We have 35 high TRL tools, so you can do almost everything, right? We have tools that evaluate the legal, the ethical, and the social impact on data and AI pipelines. Of course, we have LLM-based tools that you're going to see Ina talking about one of these later in order to advise for compliance. We have a strong aspect on policy, which, by the way, Southampton, we are leading on the ODRL part. We have an ecosystem of tools for data governance through ODRL. We can build privacy policies. We have a tool for consent management. To our knowledge, the most advanced tool for consent management. These are underlined all by ODRL computational policy. ODRL, by the way, for those that doesn't know, is the de facto language for, it's not a standard, well, it is a W3C recommendation for constructing computational and machine processable policies, right? So we have all these tools that might allow you to construct a contract or a consent management form, but underlying this, we also have this ODRL layer where everything is machine processable and machine actionable. We have a set of tools for trust and reputation management, explainability, accountability, bias detection, and so on. And before I go to the pipeliner, I will go to the green result of the project, which monitors and optimizes the environmental sustainability of our pipelines. And then all these other tools, they feed in this basic infrastructure. It's like you have a bench for building data operations and AI pipelines, and this bench feeds you with all these compliance assessment and realization tools, right? And we have more horizontal flagship AI applications using combinations of all of these tools. I will stop here and I will give the floor to Ina to continue with some specific chosen examples out of these tools. I'm happy to answer questions later or during the panels.
So thank you, George. I hope you hear me right. I'm Ina Novalia from the Department for Artificial Intelligence at Jožef Stefan Institute in Slovenia. And to continue presentation from George, I would like to give you a couple of examples of our real tools which we developed. So on this slide, you can see an example of LLM Advisor tools development pipeline. This is a mini pipeline, and the idea of LLM Advisor is to assist a developer or policymaker to make a decision about his pipeline and to assist with compliance, implementing compliance in his pipeline. So developing AI systems based on large language models raises several challenges, especially challenges related to transparency, safety, and responsible AI usage. So in this scenario, specific scenario, we have a data scientist or engineer who builds LLM-based assistant using legal and ethical knowledge base. And the development process starts with fine-tuning the model and integrating safety layer into LLM Advisor tool. So here we can see a tool which is called Spectre. This tool is used for fine-tuning models. We can see a guardrails model, which is a safety layer, and we can see LLM Advisor tool. The DATAPACT tool supports this process by providing different mechanisms for explainability, safety checks, and regulatory compliance assessment. And these tools come from different tools collections, which George already mentioned, such as Truster or Assessor. And in this way, we can make AI systems that is not only functional, but also transparent and explainable. So also just one small note that LLM advisor tool in our case should provide explainable and transparent solutions. So basically it should go back to the decision why and provide the explanation why the specific decision was made in this case. So let's go to the next slide. And here is another example, which is about smart CRM scenario. And CRM is a customer relation management system which processes personal data. In real-world application, implementing such system in a compliant way can be challenging. So organizations often face different issues such as long implementation times, involvement of many stakeholders, and lack of automated compliance assessment. Again, so here traceability is another challenge, being able to demonstrate how compliance decisions were made. Here, DATAPACT tools address these challenges by introducing compliance by design and structured reporting. Let's go to the next slide. And on this slide, you can see the whole pipeline, which was made for CRM, smart CRM, and how this pipeline can be integrated into the whole process. The process starts with creating and testing a data or AI pipeline and encoding relevant policies, such as privacy rules or GDPR requirements. And then pipeline is evaluated to check whether it's compliant with policies and regulations. If any issues are detected, the pipeline can be modified to meet the required compliance standards. So in this pipeline, the important step is obtaining explicit and informed consent when personal data is used. And by embedding the different steps directly into the pipeline lifecycle, our project DATAPACT ensures that compliance is not treated as a separate activity, but it is an integrated part of the development process. That will be, let's go to the next slide. That will be a summary of our short presentation about DATAPACT. And I would just like to mention that you can see the website of our project mentioned. And if you go to the website, you can find the documentation for all our tools described in the deliverables. You're welcome to check the documentation.
Thank you very much, Inna. And with that, I would like to ask the next project to present. It's going to be Achilles. Once again, thank you, Inna and George. And I ask you, Andrea, to take over.
Okay, I hope you are now seeing presentation mode.
Yes,
So hello everyone, good morning. I'm André Carreiro, a senior scientist in Fraunhofer, Portugal, so a technical person working in AI, and I'm the coordinator of Project Achilles. So a bit on the motivation, so to contextualize, we are a bit different because we are focusing a lot on this trustworthy AI, and so how to make this trustworthy and compliant AI, and we saw these two Achilles heels of AI pipelines, which are trust and efficiency. And so our goal is to set this benchmark for responsible and compliant AI development. And so our approach is a bit inspired on the clinical trials process, and we came up with this modular framework. And we also have this machine learning driven IDE. So IDE is usually what programmers use to build their machine learning pipelines, so just for code. And we want this to bridge the gap between more stakeholders. Moving on, so we have this iterative cycle inspired by the clinical trials. So the idea is that we start with a human-centric perspective. So we focus on gathering requirements, etc. I will show you a bit on how this is made practical. Then we can move to the data-centric part, where we look at the data, we process it, we make it compliant with GDPR, for example. And then we start working on the models, training, making them more efficient. And there's the deployment-centric stage where we actually put something in production. We have to start monitoring it. And then it feeds again into human-centric because, for example, we want to make this as robust as possible, as transparent as possible. And so it feeds into how humans are using the systems. For example, if you are including a human in the loop, then it efficiently closes this iterative loop. Okay, making it in a bit more practical terms, we are building some tools or toolkits and processes for each of these phases and how they connect to each other. So in the first human-centric stage, we are doing, of course, the ethical AI impact assessment support, but we are diving deeply into this, what we call value-sensitive design. How can we translate human values into the design process of these kind of systems? And so the idea is that we end up with these sort of specifications that translate these requirements and actual values. Then on the data-centric, we have, of course, as input, we have the first collected data, we have domain knowledge, hopefully, and then the idea is that we get this transformed or clean data or compliant data and the reports on what was done, who did it, why. So everything is traceable and accountability is promoted. So here we have methods to handle bias, both detection and mitigation, GDPR compliance, including pseudonymization and other and consent management, and of course data quality. For example, we have this strong process for data auditing and validation for different data types. Then as an example on the model-centric, we have this a strong focus on privacy. For example, we have several teams working on improving these federated learning approaches, how we distribute training so that the data doesn't leave the premises. If you think of hospitals and hospitals collaborating, it's very hard for them to share data between themselves. And so federated learning is one of the strategies that we can use to mitigate this issue. We can also anonymize models by using synthetic data and other strategies. We have a strong group working in explainable AI, and we have been figuring out how to use these artifacts of explainability also for improving overall transparency and also efficiency of training. And this means that we end up with the trained and improved model regarding these dimensions. When we go to the deployment-centric stage, this means mostly figuring out how to optimize things that will be used heavily in production. So optimizing the inference process, researching how to improve the infrastructure where the models are deployed in. For example, we are building a recommendation system that based on your pipeline, it evaluates it and it recommends if it's better to train or to do inference in GPU versus CPU, how many machines, etc., etc. And finally, we end up back at where we started with the human-centric, this time a bit more technical. And so we are focusing here on explainability, techniques to measure uncertainty and robustness, even stress testing the models, and monitoring the models in production. So the idea, we have also strong work on this reporting, as automated as possible, for example, on data cards and model cards. Okay, so we have 56 assets and counting, so we are increasing this. And the idea is, like we'll see, that this is all available either standalone or in our ACHILLES IDE. So the idea is that the current IDEs, this integrated development environment, are usually programmer-centric. Okay, so they are built for developers, and usually if you are building requirements, you have Word document or a PDF, they look at it once, and then they forget about it, and it's hard to keep track of how you comply with the different requirements or specifications. We know that copilots are getting stronger, so we did this in the proposal. They were not so good, but still there are a few gaps because they are focused on this developer role. So our idea with our IDE is to bridge the gap between these different stakeholders, from the decision makers, of course, the developers, but also end users and auditors or notified bodies that enforce either certification or compliance support. Okay, so the idea of this IDE is that we have a copilot, not just for code, but to be involved in supporting every step of the AI lifecycle. So we can start, for example, helping how to navigate this value-sensitive design process, where we manage these ethical tensions comes to surface, where we manage the conversation between the decision makers and users or final beneficiaries or affected public by the system. And we want to help these organizations figure out how their organization and the AI systems fit within the regulatory landscape. For example, we have a tool that helps you, if you give a description, a free text description of the system, it tries to fit you or the system into a risk tier according to the AI Act, and it tells you which are the corresponding obligations. So, and these can be translated into technical specifications even. Then, of course, you have these technical specifications. This is the time that the developers would pick up the work, but we allow this so we are evangelizing this concept of specification-driven development, not to be confused with vibe coding, to help the developers during their implementation. So we want to keep the specifications into the spotlight and not to have developers forgetting about it. So to avoid staleness, and this promotes also accountability on the developer side. Depending on the pipeline and the specifications, the Copilot can also recommend from the asset catalog, and hopefully this is a point of collaborations within the projects, is to suggest these different toolkits that are relevant for the application context in the form of APIs, for example. And we've also this very important part of semi-automation of the documentation. So as I've been mentioning, the data and model cards, while ensuring that humans have the final sign-off. So the idea is that agents can start pre-filling some of these documents, but then this will always be in the draft stage, and only humans can review, accept, or reject the final information that gets recorded into the documents. So this is a very simplified example. So imagine that we are working on a computer-aided diagnostic support tool using AI, and we passed it to our tool, and it classified it as a high risk. And so the Copilot knows that it has to recommend filling a fundamental rights impact assessment, and an agent can help autofill this free checklist from the existing documentation, for example, from existing model cards. Then it recommends to apply a specific bias mitigation technique or a specific explainable AI method that is appropriate for this model family that you are using and for the data type that you are exploring. It also can autofill some fields in the model cards from the code and the results that you obtained, as long as you give it access to. And this allows to quickly reproduce the results. So for example, if you iterate on your development, you can quickly run it again, and the model card gets automatically updated, at least in the more objective fields. Of course, some are subjective and humans have to figure out how to fill them, but of course there is some objective information that can be semi-automated. Okay, just to finalize with some use cases that we have in the project, I know that all projects have a healthcare use case. Ours has to do with ophthalmological conditions for diagnostic support based on machine learning. We have more creative content generation support. So how can we adapt scripts for artistic or science fiction audiovisual, so written or visual scripts. And here the topics are a bit more on copyright, controlled bias, editorial adherence, etc. We have a case on ID verification, so a bit more closer to the biometrics world. So, for example, they want to match persons with their documentation. I think we all have been facing this with some apps. And, for example, the use of synthetic data to avoid privacy issues here is very important. And finally, our HERA use case is how to streamline regulatory compliance in the pharma sector. So it's a heavily regulated sector, so it's a good use case for us, and it's a bit earlier on the life cycle of an AI system, which are also good to experiment with. And I think this was my time, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andre, for this detailed presentation. With that, I would like to invite Venerity to present accomplished project. And you can take over the screen.
Thank you, Katerina.
Yeah, there is some minor issue. Maybe you could mute yourself on one of the devices.
Just a moment. I hope. Okay.
Not yet.
No, it's not on my side. Not sure. Maybe,
Now
Katerina, if you try to mute.
No, now
It's
we can
okay
hear
now.
you very well, and you could share your screen, please.
I hope now it's not better.
Yeah, we can hear and hear you well, and also we see your screen. If you could just go to presentation mode. And you
Okay,
can start. Thank you.
thank you. So, hello everyone. I'm Fenareti Lampadaki. I'm sorry, I'm hearing twice my voice, and it's not ideal right
We
now.
can hear you well, so you're not doubled by us.
Okay. So I'm the technical director of Suite 5 and the technical coordinator. Can you hear me now? Because I muted the
We can hear
microphone.
you.
Yeah, we can
Okay,
hear you well.
so if you can continue, if you can still hear me, I have muted my speakers because I could hear myself twice. Sorry for that. I don't know what happened. Anyway, I'm the accomplished technical coordinator, and in the next moments, I'm going to present you what are the results, what are the perspectives of Accomplish when it comes to compliance by design. Accomplish is one of the sister projects that have been funded together and are presented here all together. Just two aspects that I want to highlight, and you will see in the next moments that are a little bit differentiating us. Automation appears to all of us, but certification aspects, how certification controls are taking the next step after the compliance assessment is something we're also looking into apart from the compliance assessment parts. And in addition, not just data and AI operations, but also what happens with the process of organizations, what happens with the compliance of systems when the data and AI operations are in place are also aspects that we're looking into in more detail. And when we talk about automation, human in the loop, human understandable context, recommendations that make sense to be implemented by humans is something that is of particular interest to our results, and we have paid particular attention to that part especially. So when it comes to how we, let's say, interpret compliance by design, because it's a keyword you have been hearing and will be hearing a lot, what does it mean essentially? For us, it means that when we offer different services for the data and AI operations, we have already taken into consideration different compliance requirements that emerge from the regulatory acts, from GDPR, from the AI Act, and so on. All those policies are models in ODRL, and we have separated the concerns, obviously, between the policies, the modeling time versus the inference time to ensure that any updates on the policies can be handled as well. But those requirements that are embedded in the data and AI operations, what they imply in the end of the day for the stakeholders, they imply that instead of reactive data and AI operations, that when the time comes for a compliance assessment, for a certification, they may disrupt the operations within an organization, within a company. We bring proactiveness. So at the time the data and AI operations are designed, the data engineers, the data scientists, the technical people are in general able to perform compliance assessment. And this is not an one-off exercise. This is something that happens continuously. When the data and AI operations are in production, we are able to check continuously that compliance remains and there has not been any change at any moment. With Accomplish, we promote and we provide automated assessments in different levels and continuous monitoring that is combined with a human in the loop approach. And we try to bridge the gap between, okay, there are a lot of legal acts, a lot of not just the major ones that I mentioned, but also a lot of industry regulations, a lot of additional regulations that one needs to ensure that all their operations are always compliant. So we try to enable, empower the technical teams to be aware of what are the compliance requirements and what are the tangible actions that they need to take in order to make the data and AI operations compliant. And the changes are directly included within the design, so the cost is eventually reduced with such an approach. So we are offering through the automation engine we are providing in our cloud platform different automation workflows, different automation recipes that essentially involve automated compliance assessment at each and every step of the data operations, AI operations design and execution whenever needed, the status assessment, the risk assessment that is performed automatically is complemented by inputs that are provided on demand if there is certain articles of some regulations cannot provide a definite answer and human input is needed. Or if there are already available consent forms, if there are operations within an organization that we need to look into, all those can be assessed as well, and taking into account both the automated assessment and the human inputs that we are collecting, the analysis that is performed with the help of LLMs, with the help of Gen AI, as recommendations are provided in order to ensure that the actions that emerge are known to the end user. The outcomes of the compliance assessment are stored in a permission blockchain through our compliance digital passport to ensure that there is traceability of compliance in each and every step, and the status is also exposed to external organizations as needed. There are many different workflows and recipes depending on what is to be assessed. Apart from the compliance automation part, we have a certification automation part as well that ensures that what is written on the compliance digital passport is validated at the moment that certification needs to be performed. Different certification controls are cross-checked at that time. The compliance digital passport is updated, and in the end, it may result into issuing a certification and providing a summary in a certification scorecard. We are anticipating two modes, the guardrail mode when the data and AI operations are under design, and the gatekeeper mode in which the data operations are already in place and we just trigger some of the services to cross-check if the data are really compliant or not. You can see here a linear, in a way, pipeline, but it doesn't mean that this execution is linear. The user is able to define the steps in our orchestrator, what is to be executed and in what order. Once the data harvesting part arrives and the configuration is provided by the user, a compliance check is performed. If this step is compliant, the user can proceed with the data cleaning and matching step. If it's not compliant, if there are problems with the consent forms, there may be different scenarios that either enforce the user to enable a step later on in the pipeline. For example, if there are personal data, the data anonymization step is a must, or there are recommendations for the next step about things that need to be added. So the input from the compliance assessment that is performed in each step is taken into consideration on the next steps, or it may block the specific step from continuing if there are issues of non-compliance. There are different services regarding quality assessment, synthetic data generation, bias detection that may be triggered in different cases. The main point I wanted to make here is that the different policy models from the ODRL policy models from GDPR, DATAPACT, Data Governance Act are checked in each and every step to ensure compliance. And the same applies for the AI Act, where we check not only the models that are trained, the input data sets, whether they are compliant, whether there is bias, whether the quality is enough. And there are many different steps along the way to explain the model results, different services essentially we are offering to assess the security of the model, if there are any vulnerabilities, what is the most resources, let's say, the best deployment planning for production for the specific models in order to minimize the resources required, but also for the production time. At the time that a model is executed, we offer functionalities related to data and model observability, related to the performance of the models. If we detect any data drifts, performance drifts, anything that may be happening, to trigger whenever necessary another assessment if there are certain conditions that make us a little bit skeptical. And energy footprint assessment as a step, it can appear in any place of the pipeline to ensure that we check what type of resources are needed and are assessed throughout those operations. If, again, the operations are in place, we have a different mode, different services that are to be triggered in order to check the compliance of a trained model that is already in place and may be already in production, for example. Our solutions are in two, let's say, and our components are in two levels. On the one hand, we have the compliance platform that is a cloud platform in which all the magic happens, in which the compliance assessment occurs, in which the recommendations are produced, the certification, and everything is orchestrated through an automation engine. The users can interact, see the results, can provide inputs as necessary, and all the results across each step are stored in the DLT in a permission blockchain that I mentioned for the compliance digital passport. On the bottom part, you see the toolkit. The toolkit can be installed on premise. All the different services we offer for the data operations and the AI operations are practically running on premise, and they are orchestrated for the data and AI pipelines, depending on the user selections, what are the services that are enabled. You can see here many different services that one would expect to see in order to ensure compliance with the different acts, and bias detection, synthetic data generation, model explanation service, model security service, and so on. And one more part that I want to highlight is that the toolkit can be installed on premise. It interacts as needed, exposing only logs, not data, not models, to the platform to perform the assessment. The platform is accessible by the organizations that own a data set to see the results of the compliance assessment and the status of the compliance assessment, but it is also accessible by collaborators of a specific organization or by any governmental authority, compliance officers, whatever, in order to check the compliance of data, AI operations, and eventually organizations, and what is the status based on the traceability we are offering, on the status, on the recommendations through the compliance digital passport. We are bringing together formal policy models in ODRL, human in the loop, analyzing forms, and providing feedback through forms that are generated based on the needs, and of course GenAI approaches to automate everything that it needs to run under the hood and to perform compliance assessments for industry-specific standards, for additional regulations, not just the main acts, the Data Act, GDPR, AI Act that I mentioned. With regard to how the results are tested, validated, we are applying our results to 4 demonstrators in energy, automotive, robotics and manufacturing, and aviation. And we have one additional layer of validating our results, since I mentioned that there is a distinction between the cloud platform and the toolkit that can be installed on premise for any stakeholder that wants compliant by design data and AI operations. We're going to check as part of our activities how the platform, the compliance platform, can be used by external solutions. For example, the commercial platform, the no-code AI platform we are offering as Suite 5 Grifo, but also the minimum viable data space, Click, other platforms, in order to see, to what extent and how their compliance can be assessed by the compliance platform we are offering by exposing the necessary logs and information that the platform needs. So thank you all for your attention. You can find more information about the project in our website, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Nareti, for the presentation. So we are moving on, and the last but not least in the list is the certain project. So please, Martin, Elena, feel free to share the screen and the information.
Okay, thank you, Katarina. Today we, at the Certain project, are going to take a slightly different approach from the other three projects in our presentation. And we will not be giving you an overview of the entire project. For that, I would encourage you to follow some of the links that are included in this presentation. The slide Katarina just showed, and there's some links at the end of our presentation where you can get an idea of the broader Certain project use cases and utilities and solutions we're coming up with. Instead, both Elena and I represent the social sciences side of our project, and we'll be discussing today specifically legal uncertainties. So the Certain project, very optimistically named, but that's sort of the end point of the project, is to be certain. And we're definitely starting from a point of uncertainty when it comes to the legal side of things. So in our work package, Elena and I, along with our other colleagues, were responsible for legal, ethical, and social analyses, which have just been completed. So we'll dive into those a little bit and then talk a bit about where we're going when it comes to actually developing solutions, even from, again, some non-technical perspective. We can still help develop solutions for some of the problems we have already identified. So the first three deliverables from our work package were a series of reports focusing on the legal, then ethical, and then social aspects of AI compliance and data compliance in the EU. So the first report was the legal analysis, which was a foundational overview of EU regulation on artificial intelligence. I summarize it here in 2 sentences. It's about a 70-page document, so it's a very very thorough and comprehensive analysis of all of the various regulations in the space, which have already been mentioned. There's very wide range of them, not just the AI Act and the Data Act, but many other ones that differ depending on, you know, the field and whatnot. But well, first point being, and this probably comes as no surprise to anybody, the regulatory compliance space is complex, and the complexity is largely because there's a lot of overlap in that space. And what also makes it complex, especially when it comes to the AI Act, is maybe the main culprit here, practical compliance aspects are still very unclear. So there's a lot of text, a lot of guidance, a lot of where we're going, when things will be implemented, what things in general will have to be complied with, but not a lot of guidance yet on how to do that exactly, or what is considered fully compliant. In our second deliverable, ethical considerations of AI compliance, we basically examined some of these ethical values that you would find in the regulations, like fairness and transparency. So these more abstract values, which are in reality the underpinning of most of the actual regulations, but translating those into concrete practices. So starting this this process of maybe starting to answer some of the practical compliance aspects, but yes, basically focusing on the ethical aspects of the regulations. And one of the ways we also did that was by operationalizing the ethical and gender governance of these various aspects, including developing a self-assessment checklist for ethical self-assessment checklist, which we will be using in our project, but we'll hopefully be able to achieve some broader use as well once it's fully published. And finally, we just finished our social analysis of AI acceptance modeling, which involved cross-country qualitative insights through a series of focus group discussions. And this was really kind of setting aside what the actual regulations are and instead really diving into the social science side of it and asking members of the public, essentially, analyzing the insights, their insights on AI. So gathering and quantifying these social perceptions. And we went to various countries in the EU and outside the EU and got a lot of insights. One of the major, let's say, cross-cutting findings, and it differed depending on exactly where we got the information from or which group we were interviewing. But overall, there is this expectation of meaningful human control. And one of the ways, probably the main way to, of course, exert that is through regulatory compliance. And people are interested in that. They're not interested in releasing that control. So what we've found generally throughout the course of our work so far, when it comes to legal, ethical, social aspects of the space, is a few ongoing challenges, let's say, and that would start with the regulatory uncertainty. So that could include the introduction of new regulations, major changes to current regulations. So the best example of this would be the Digital Omnibus, which has been introduced, which proposes potential major overhauls to basically all of the regulations I've already mentioned. And then there's also problems with delays in existing regulations, like the delay of the harmonized standards, which is a very important piece of the puzzle when it comes to the AI Act. And all of this just creates a regulatory uncertainty, and it makes it harder to really start digging into what is actual compliance if we're not sure if it could change in the next few months. This is also influenced at a larger level by political uncertainty. So this could include things like the influence of big tech and dependence on transatlantic relations, which is kind of wrapped up with the influence of big tech. So depending on how the EU is getting along with America can also influence how they are regulating AI and data. And of course, there's also just questions of how important is this in the context of other things going on in the world, but we won't get into that in this presentation, maybe. Then, of course, trust in AI, which I brought up, especially in the social context. And there's trust when we talk about trust, like we've been talking about in like AI as a product, but then there's also trust when it comes to institutions and how they are regulating AI, and that can contribute to the overall trust in the product of AI or the idea of AI. And of course, yeah, trust in aspects of the data governance itself, which is in the EU, of course, a big deal. GDPR being sort of the cornerstone foundation of contemporary EU digital law. And then, of course, complexity, which is, like I mentioned before, a lot of overlapping regulations and differing legal frameworks depending on which act we're talking about, how you categorize yourself, how different regulations apply to you, and sifting through all of that can be a real nightmare if you do not have the proper tools. So with that in mind, I will turn it over to my colleague Olena, who will talk about some solutions that we will be developing as we go on in the project from the legal, ethical, social sciences perspective.
Yes, hello everyone. So as Martin has already mentioned, that navigating the European legal landscape can feel like stepping into the jungle. And the biggest challenge is that compliance, it does not fit all. Whether you're a small startup developing a model or a large enterprise deploying it, your obligations change drastically depending on the role you play in the value chain, depending on the data you use, depending on the risk level of your solution. And the challenge is to figure out, so what exactly do you have to do? And in our project, we are trying to build a clear pathway through this jungle to translate these abstract legislations into concrete and stakeholder-specific actions. So the first concrete solution that we are currently working on, please, Martin, next slide, Yes. So the first concrete solution that we are currently working on is the guidelines for entering AI data markets, building upon the 3 previous deliverables that Martin has already introduced. We are creating guidelines that specifically help data holders to enter the data market safely. Primarily, we are focusing on the 2 newer legislation, the Data Act and the Data Governance Act, but of course, also incorporating the GDPR and all the other data-related legislations. And I guess it's obvious why focusing on data is important to AI solutions, because AI services are as good as the data they are trained on. So by encouraging data altruism and structured data sharing under the Data Act, we can encourage more data holders to enter the data market, and as such, increase the volume and the quality of available data sets. So potentially ensure that the data for training the AI systems is from the start both ethically sourced and legally compliant. And finally, the last solution will be kind of the culmination of our work, not just our working package, but certain in a way, will be the multidisciplinary guidelines for AI stakeholders. As such, it will be a bridge between the legal requirements and the technical design. Once you understand the rules from our previous work, understand your role in the value chain, the guidelines from this deliverable, they will tell you how to actually implement these rules. So the centerpiece of this deliverable will be the logical decision tree model, which will allow stakeholders to input their specific parameters and receive a tailored compliance roadmap tailored to their parameters. So we will try to move beyond just the theory, beyond the translation of the legal requirements, and already include compliance by design tools, recommendations, which we will take from other working packages from people who are more technical experts than we are, and put it all together. So in such a way, helping the AI developers to build their AI solutions compliant by design. So thank you.
Yes, so thank you. So this was just, as I said, just a snapshot of our little corner of the project. So there's a lot more going on in Certain, so I encourage you again to visit the website and check out the links to understand the project more broadly, but we thought we would give you a little insight into what we're working on over in social sciences land. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin and Elena. Indeed, as mentioned in the chat, the slides are going to be shared with all of you by mailing, and I guess that it consists the full information on how you can connect with each project in separate to get to know more and learn in details what are the solutions. Thank you once again to all the presenters. And now, as you can see on the screen, we are going to dive deeper into what are the actual synergies and what are the common projects for these 4 projects. So how we can complement each other and what are going to be the common ideas that we are developing. With that, I have a few questions that we will answer within the next 2 minutes. And the first would be, how do the tool sets developed across the 4 projects complement each other? And where do you see the strongest synergy emerging? And I would love to ask one of the partners to answer this question and provide the view of the project. Please, Andrea. And
hello again. Yeah, I think because I've been participating in some of the task forces, maybe I can answer this one. I'll try to be quick in a matter of time. So we all started from the same point with the same call. So there's a lot of requirements that each of the projects has to fulfill. For example, it was strictly mentioned that we have to address bias, we have to map with legal and ethical mappings, we have to foster transparency, etc. So I think it's clear, and it was clear from the presentation, that there are a lot of overlapping points, but how we are approaching it's different. especially because our context is different. The use cases that we are working are different, some in different industries, and so the requirements will be necessarily also different. One aspect, because we have been collecting what's different, because we do not want to reinvent the wheel, and so we are trying to identify from the beginning what's common and unique, and when there's something common, how we can collaborate and complement each other. We have been gathering, so we have been setting up these task forces, and I will explain a bit one example. I just want to mention that, for example, from what I see there, one example is the green AI approach. So, for example, I know that DATAPACT and maybe Accomplish are more focused on assessing, so this monitoring carbon tracker from DATAPACT, while I saw that from Trustworthy and ACHILLES, we have practical approaches to suggest how to make models more efficient, energy-wise or data-wise, for example. Another example is some projects have a bit more depth in the user studies, like ACHILLES and Certain, for perception of trust or value-sensitive design in the case of ACHILLES. And for example, Accomplish, I think, goes the deepest into the certification part of the cycle, of the life cycle, right? Just wanted to share a quick example on the ontologies task force. We managed to set up this very specific task because we are working a lot with ontology. Ontology provide this really more dependable scaffolding, not to rely only on LLMs, of course, because we know how they can hallucinate and invent things. So having a good ground to make solid work like ontologies and knowledge graphs are really important. And one example is, for example, we know that Certain is working on this ontology on the Annex 4 of the AI Act. And we at ACHILLES are integrating or starting to integrate this ontology into our API to build these model cards that I mentioned. So these data cards and model cards. And so this already, some synergies are being born. Of course, we have to go deeper into how to make practical work more collaborative. And in setting up the task forces and these events together, I think it's very important. But we are starting, and I think we are getting somewhere. Thank you, Katarina.
Thank you very much for the exhaustive answer. Moving forward, in exploring deeper the collaboration, the question would be, how can the outputs of the 4 projects collectively support the full AI lifecycle, from data preparation and model development to deployment, monitoring, and compliance? That will be the perspective of Certain project. Please, Martin.
Yes, I will field this one, although I'm afraid we can't probably answer this question in its entirety because, as I said, we're not maybe fully abreast of all of the more technical compliance methods we're coming up with. But basically, it's a similar answer to Andre's, basically. So we can to basically collectivize all of the findings and of the 4 projects should be really our goal because, as Andre said, we have different focuses. Some of the projects focusing on data, some focusing on trustworthy AI, certification. I know Certain probably has like the widest purview, but maybe goes a little less deep on all of the specific topics. But we need all of these together in order to actually cover the full AI lifecycle, because without them, then there, of course, will be gaps, and that should really be the goal of the 4 projects, is to try and cover basically everything. Because as we said in our presentation, there's maybe a lot of legal uncertainty, and the actual EU bodies are a bit slow, which is kind of a problem in this field that moves so quickly. So if we can have at least something now developed by projects like ours, bodies like ours, that can sort of begin to fill these gaps until the time maybe there's a more centralized body like the EU that can implement or endorse the solutions that we come up with. That's incredibly important. But I mean, how can we actually do that? The question is by publishing and sharing our outputs, which hopefully we've been doing already. And having events like these, of course, is always helpful. And the one, like, probably that solution, which was something Andre already mentioned, having these thematic group meetings or task forces where we just take people working on similar things in the projects and mesh them together. And unfortunately, it seems very simple, but it's been maybe not as easy as you think. It's a bit of a logistical puzzle to figure out sometimes. But as Andre said, once you get them together, we have this great synergy already on the ontologies, and that should be the example for the rest of us in all the other various little topics that we should be working more together.
Indeed. Thank you very much. Moving forward, so on exploring the collaboration, I would like to ask, where do you already see interoperability or shared building blocks emerging between the projects, and how could this be strengthened further?
I guess this one I can take from DATAPACT.
Thank you, George.
Okay, so interoperability for us is very important, and the golden principle of interoperability is reusing standards and reusing languages that are standards and that other people are using. So in this sense, we always go back. We have a kind of a feedback loop in our design and architecture, where we gather user requirements, we move on to implement tool features, but then we always go back and check whether we have done this in the most standard and interoperable way. So we have a separate, let's say, checkpoint in our tools in order to embed interoperability while building these shared building blocks. Ontologies is one example that's Martin just referred to. That's important, not only to think about standards internally to a project, but to talk about this with the other projects, right? So we have seen reference architectures and reference models and standards being implemented slightly differently or having unknown corners when you're trying to implement those, right? So we see these are a great sets of best practices and guidelines, but when it comes to implementing, you might have some design choices to take, and it's good if we put those on the table between all projects. That's our perspective. So having close discussions while developing our APIs and our tools, while implementing the standards, right? Not diverging from the standards, but still implementing details and letting other projects know and other people know how we do this, we think is the way to move towards interoperability. Another example is, for example, when I talked earlier, the ODRL language, right? This is a language published by W3C, and when you go to implement this and you go to the W3C website, you see natural language. There is a big text, a big document written in natural language about how this language features should operate, right? Of course, this is open to interpretation. This is not a formal semantics in any way. So you would like an algorithm to check an ODRL policy. Will we all implement the same algorithm if we not talk to each other? Probably not. So that's why it's important the policies that we are building or that other projects are building are compatible, right, with the ODRL language that other projects are building. So again, sitting down together, doing these task forces, and adhering to the standards, talking about the standards is the way for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. And the last would be the question, where early common outcomes are we observing across the project? For example, the terminology alignment, compliance approaches, or shared use cases.
I think it's my turn on that, Katarina, to share the accomplished perspective. So actually, all the projects started in a pretty common time frame. And starting, I will comment in each of those aspects separately. The terminology alignment has been a challenge that we all faced, and it was a necessary precondition to ensure that we talk the same language. I think this is a big lesson learned, at least from the accomplished perspective, but I'm pretty sure it is a shared lesson learned across all our projects. The technical people talk a different language than the legal people, the certification experts we had also in our consortium. It's always a challenge to ensure that the terminology and the language we speak with each other when we talk about compliance projects is something we need to ensure. When it comes to compliance approaches, I think the homework and the initial activities all our projects did was to start with studying the regulations, studying the different acts, trying to understand what they imply in terms of the approaches we are going to follow. We all tried to create, or almost all, at least I know that accomplished, DATAPACT followed the ODRL path to try to create policy models based on the regulations. This has, again, been something challenging. It is an early common outcome, but I think this is something we could, let's say, reflect upon about how the outcomes we have achieved since the implied extensions to ODRL. ODRL on its own required certain extensions to support GDPR, the AI Act, and the rest of the acts we're offering. This is, again, something that we have worked on, different projects, and the compliance approaches we are following could offer, let's say, our early common outcomes. The last part regarding the approach, no, I have one more point regarding the approaches. We have approached compliance in slightly different ways. In certain cases, there are complementary services we're offering or similar services in terms of bias detection, synthetic data generation, and so on. So the services we're offering, you will see many different implementations for compliance, for compliant by design, data and AI operations by our different projects. The use cases are unique in most of our projects, I would say, so it's not a matter of shared use cases per se, but overall, I think that all the participants in this webinar got the feeling that we may have a common topic that we were all, let's say, funded, but there are and we may have worked in certain cases in a similar way, and there is complementarity, but also there are differences in our approaches and differentiating points across the way that we have provided our results so far, and we will continue to do so because we have some time ahead of us for all the projects.
Thank you so much, Veneraty, and all for providing this complex and detailed overview of how the 4 projects can collaborate effectively to achieve the common objectives and goals. So I would love now to move towards the panel discussion. We have 20 minutes left, and I encourage you strongly also to start writing your questions in the Q&A session so that we can dedicate a few minutes after the panel to answer the questions. As you can see, we are going to dive deeper on what does practical European AI compliance framework look like. And my first question, would be, what are the biggest compliance challenges that are faced by organizations today? So with that, I would like to ask Martin what would be his opinion on that.
Yes, this might be a slightly biased opinion, again, based on what I've been looking into and studying already. But I think it's sort of a step 0 problem is, in my opinion, the biggest compliance challenge. Not, how to comply with these regulations, what specific tools to use, or what metrics that we have to comply with. But basically, for any organization that is not in possession of a large in-house legal team, they don't even know where to start when it comes to regulatory compliance. They don't know what they have to comply with. They don't know what applies to them. They don't even know maybe that certain regulations exist that they're supposed to be complying with. So it's sort of a best guess situation for a lot of these smaller companies. So I think, in my opinion, that would be the biggest compliance challenge is, again, step 0, figuring out what you need to comply with and just a general, very simple pathway of how to comply with it before you start getting into these more specific, complex questions of compliance.
Thank you. Andrea, what would be your opinion on that?
Yeah, I agree with this complexity in navigating. So, but I would add that, for example, usually we have things set in place for traditional software that is deterministic. You get input A, you get output B every time, right? For that, we know how compliance should be implemented. For AI, that it's non-deterministic, and people said for a long time it couldn't be certified because of that. This is why we actually look at it from the clinical trial perspective, right? So the AI from a specific input is different, like a drug, medical drug is different for every patient. And so having this stress testing the models, having model cards as drug leaflets, for us, it's a bit of the challenge. So how do we map a robust compliance process so the right thing should be the easiest thing to do. Otherwise, organizations won't do it at all. So I think that's the major challenge, how to break these barriers, first on the definition and then on to materialize it.
Thank you very much, Andrea. So I would move on and return back to the legal aspect and ask Olena, so where do frameworks need to align across Europe?
Yes, I think, well, if we talk content-wise and look at these regulations, I think one of the aspects where they could align better is the data management and everything that has to do with data, because right now AI developers can be stuck in a bit of like this legal paradox that certain regulations would encourage data sharing and keeping data for longer. And like Data Act is all about, data altruism. But then we have GDPR, which is about preserving rights, about not sharing data too much, about keeping data as long or like as little as needed. So, and I think the European Commission is already aware of these issues, because if we look at the digital omnibus and the proposed changes that they are coming up with, a lot of them has to do with data, but it still hasn't been accepted. So we are at the current position right now. Nothing has changed, but it has to change. And also, if we look at this like EU versus national level, there is also a lot of alignment that is needed, because we have high-level law, but it's not being implemented by all the nation states evenly at the same speed with the same capacity. And there are many issues, even like, for example, if we look at the case of Sweden, which we could consider as a more developed national state, technically developed, but even they are complaining about brain drain. We even like locally, we have it that a lot of experts are either going to Brussels, so the AI office is becoming even more smarter and can tell us even better how to implement certain things. But then locally, we don't have enough people to implement this. Or even further, the experts move to other jurisdictions where there is less laws, where it's easier now to develop these solutions, and they go to, I don't know, to California or somewhere else. So yeah, even on that like EU versus national level, we need to align it better for the legislation to actually work. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the detailed reply. And now maybe we are going to move direction more practical questions. So it would be, how can compliance become continuous instead of one-off? With that, I would like to ask Ina to share the opinion.
So yes, definitely compliance should not be treated as one-time activity, because AI systems change over time. Models are trained, retrained, updated, pipelines evolve, and we enter into the era of exponential development. The more we live, the faster it goes, right? And in DATAPACT specifically, we address this by embedding compliance directly into AI pipeline lifecycle. And so we have tools that help to continuously evaluate and address such aspects as bias, robustness, explainability. and we can also generate reports. And that eventually means that organizations can maintain up-to-date compliance documentation, and they can also quickly demonstrate compliance during audits or some regulatory checks.
Great. I would like to ask also the same question, Finereti.
Yes, I think the answer here is in the combination. How we can ensure not an once-off compliance, but continuous compliance lies in the combination of automation with human in the loop. Automation to automatically collect logs, automatically collect information regarding the operations, the data and AI operations that are in place and are continuously running in production environments to ensure that at any moment that is needed, that certain circumstances may have changed, or a compliance check need to be performed again, those logs, this information is exposed, is readily available for another compliance check to be automatically performed. The second part is the human in the loop, because we may automate things, but on the other hand, we need humans to be aware, to be able to monitor the compliance status at any moment and take appropriate action. So even if an AI model, even if a data set is, let's say, bias-free, the model is compliant with the AI Act, we need to keep humans in the loop to be able to monitor the compliance status, to trigger an assessment as needed. And if there are any drifts, and with the model observability tools and techniques that are gaining more and more momentum right now, to be able to inform humans, to inform the appropriate users, let's say, that there are incidents, there are performance problems, data drifts, and so on. So I think that they will not, those two aspects, on the one hand, automation and human in the loop, can help us move towards more to the direction of continuous compliance rather than checking it once a year and forgetting about it afterwards.
Thank you, Finereti. And I think that this question is also or at most relevant, especially for the healthcare domain. That's why I would like to ask Andre your opinion on this.
Yeah, I'll just adding, because I agree with all of these things. I'll just add that important to make this compliance part of the process is to involve the different stakeholders into it, because if you make this very separate, so developers do it one side and then the compliance officers do it supervisionally, then you have human in the loop, for example, in the monitoring agent combination, things get lost in the middle. So you have to have a very strict flow that everyone can agree upon. So governance as overall is also very important in this process.
Thank you very much. I would like to move to another aspect of it and to ask about the data spaces. And my question would be, how do data spaces improve trust, traceability, and sovereignty? Maybe you, Martin, could share your perspective on this.
Yes, and I'm far from the expert on data spaces, but I just wanted to make a comment on this, that especially when it comes to trust, I think from the at least organizational side, data spaces to me are a perfect solution when we talked about aligning frameworks. It's sort of the answer to this data misalignment that Olena mentioned, that organizations are very hesitant to share data in the EU because it's very dangerous to do so if you're not in compliance. It can lead to real fines and create a lot of issues. So, of course, in most cases, it's just not even worth it to even try. So the concept of data spaces makes it so that we can align with these newer regulatory goals of like sharing data more easily and then selling data more easily from like the Data Act and Data Governance Act, while still being trusting that somebody is taking care of the idea that we need to be in compliance with all of this data. So developing data spaces that are, separate from the brokers maybe, or the markets themselves, having them developed by people who know what they're doing, like hopefully we do. that we are building in compliance and can prove that the compliance is built in, and makes it extremely easy for companies and other data holders to trust, essentially, that their data can be sold and is fully in compliance with other regulations like the GDPR.
Thank you very much, Martin, and all for answering the questions. So I'm just checking also the Q&A session, and I guess that we could continue our panel by answering some questions. I also want to ask our audience to share the questions if there are some, but you can also raise your hand and I will unmute you. So let me read the first question. Maybe our expert can also prepare to answer. Could you please tell us how will all the tools presented be made available to users? So what would be the answer? What is your opinion on that?
Maybe I can give it a go. Yeah, from the ACHILLES perspective, it depends, right? So we have a lot of things that are background knowledge and so are managed by the organizations, but we know we have been collecting these results, and most of them will be open sourced, and we will have a central repository. So for example, if a tool is on an organization's repository, it will also still be referenced in the central repository from ACHILLES, so you can be used standalone. And the IDE will have at least a part, so it's a commercial entity that is developing, but they committed to open source at least the core part of it. So the IDE and the Copilot will have a part that you can use it freely. Other parts will, of course, depending on the exploitation strategies that we come up with during the project. But yeah, at least some of the tools will be freely available.
Thank you very much, Andre. Does anyone want to complement the answer? All right, then we could move on to the next question. Thank you for the question, first of all. So the next one would be, how mature is each technology? For example, for bias detection, for personal data detection, etc.
I can give it a go if you allow me to. Yeah. Okay. So I find this question very interesting in combination with the previous discussion. So how mature is each technology is relative to the task at hand, right? I want to redirect a little bit the question and ask how no matter the matureness of a particular tool, so explainability or bias, they are very good in particular tasks, especially in academia or in research. In research, you might have better results in a particular domain than others. Right? How do you bring this to the market? How do you bring this to the people? No matter how mature the technology is, there is a level of accuracy. 87% in this particular task. How do you bring this kind of technology to the people? I think that's the most important question. And how do you create those bridges so that as the technology improves, companies and SMEs and people, they always benefit from the improvement, and you don't want to start from scratch. Right? So I want to point out something here that was implied in the rest of the discussion, right? Which is that the law, to my opinion, and if you want to be compliant to the law, does not necessarily put processes in place, right? It puts requirements or sometimes things that you're not allowed to do, but it doesn't tell you exactly how to do things, right? So, and Fennaretti talked about this, and other people talked about this. How do we capture this anecdotal experience or process from people or lawyers that help a company be compliant or an SME being compliant, and how do we replicate that, right? And to this extent, I don't think always the answer is in the technology, right? So we've been thrown at these compliance projects, and the people in the commission might say sometimes, "Hey, technologists, solve this compliance problem for me," but it's not always a technology problem, in the sense that I would even call it that we need computers in the loop not humans in the loop, right? So we need humans solving the problems, humans finding out these processes and using computers auxiliary. So that would be my take. So very relevant question. Sorry, I twisted that, but that was my take on it. Sorry.
Thank you very much, George. Would anyone like to complement? Yes,
please. If I may complement the answer by George, I would just like to stand to the point he mentioned about from scratch. So we are all innovation actions. We're not research and innovation actions. So for all the services and the advancements we make, we are based on background technologies, existing services, tools that the partners bring, so as to limit a lot the amount of technologies and services we start from scratch. So the maturity is different when we start something from scratch versus we build on existing knowledge, on existing background technologies that we have. So that's the only point I just wanted. I totally agree with what George mentioned. I wanted to highlight the part that our technologies, and I think that for all projects, it will be the same. The tools, the services we are delivering, as we are in innovation action, we have high TRLs to meet. We don't start from 1 or 2 TRL, we start higher based thanks to the background technologies we all have.
Thank you very much for the reply. I would also like to ask again whether it could be complemented by someone else. Otherwise, I want to thank you all once again. And with this, I guess we could proceed already with the closing part of the webinar. I hope that the information shared today was useful for all of you, and I want to thank our participants for joining today and encourage everyone strongly to engage with each project separately, and also stay tuned for the joint activities that are plenty and they're planned, and throughout the next 2 years you're going to see the alliance on different events and also in the web. Thank you once again, and with this I wish you to have a wonderful day. As a reminder that this webinar is going to be published, so please share the information and, as I mentioned, stay tuned. Have a wonderful day and take care a lot. Goodbye.
And thank you, Katarina, for hosting.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katarina.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.